Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm here in Standing Rock in North Dakota, the site of the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline. This is Derrick Broze with Activist Post and the Conscious Resistance Network.
We're placing you under arrest. The city of Houston does not welcome you here at all. You are not. Please don't run over me. Please don't run over me. We got a war criminal right here.
Derrick Broze, we're at Anarchapulco 2018. This is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance and Activist Post. I'm here in Houston, Texas.
What the fuck?
We've been fighting a long time, and we have all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea. You have no idea. How important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to continue our conversation around rights, around civil liberties, around the situation that us freethinkers, individuals who are challenging the dogmas in our world today and who are trying to find a path towards liberty, towards freedom, towards somewhere where a diverse group of people with all sorts of interests and ideas can come together and coexist and can live in a world that respects individual liberty, individual sovereignty, and does not try to use the force of government against your fellow human being. For those of us who are trying to pursue this place, we have increasingly limited options here on planet Earth, as the majority have now, really pushed in the collectivist direction that your individual liberties are not so important if it's good for everyone else. So they're willing to sacrifice individual liberties in the name of the collective good. But this exerts itself in a number of different ways. It can come from the left and it can come from the right. I've actually written about this in my third book, Manifesto of the Free Humans. I had a chapter you can find on my website called The Authoritarian Right and Left that I co-wrote with my friend John Vibes. And I think it still very much applies today because we are dealing with an authoritarian right and an authoritarian left in different ways. Right now, of course, many people, including myself, have been seeing the authoritarianism come from the left in the form of pushing vaccine mandates and mask mandates and really willing to use violence to back up the cult of scientism. But make no mistakes, the right-wingers also have their own sense of collectivism and their own willingness to use violence when push comes to shove. This is why we have to push past these boxes that people attempt to put us in, these matrices of left and right and Democrat, Republican, conservative, and liberal, as if we're all that simple and our beliefs can be placed in some simple box like that. So we know that we're more complex than that, but there are big differences. And I've noticed an increasing tendency, and this is what we're going to talk about today, to label political enemies, let's say those of the left, they're terrorists. And of course, the other side, those are racist, those are terrorists, to right-wingers. We're going to talk about that today, talk about the danger of that, and also a history of how the government has already been doing this, labeling Americans, and I'm sure the same thing happening in other Western nations like the UK and Australia, labeling them domestic extremists or domestic terrorists, and then using that label to strip people of their constitutional protected, God-given natural liberty, depending on how you want to see it. And it's been used against right and left. So this is not just a right versus left thing. In fact, if you're still falling prey to that, my friends, you're still in the trap. You're still in what I describe as the 5 layers of deception, which one day I'll write an article about. You're still in that trap and you need to get out of it. But before we go any further, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com. This is my home for all my content, which is where you can find my documentaries, my books, essays, articles, podcasts from myself and from several other contributors. We have a growing team here. If you ever want to contribute, you've got content, essays, articles, poetry, and it fits our message. Go over here to the About page, see what we're about, see if you think you align. Contact me. We can get you on this channel, get you your essays on the website. If you want to follow us, do so at Float. We are live right now at float.app/consciousresistance. So if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube, I invite you to get off right now and go to float.app/consciousresistance and watch us live there so you're not supporting either one of the platforms, which are likely going to delete our channel soon. You can also follow us on Minds, on Hive, join my new text list. You can follow us on Telegram. And if you want to support me, you can do so at Patreon. And finally, our videos are on BitChute and Library. So, all right, let's get into this. As I said, the topic is the danger of labeling your political enemies as domestic terrorists. And I think that this is something that we really need to understand. Now, like I said, we're going to go through some examples of the conversation that we're dealing with today. We're going to go through some past examples of right-wingers being labeled domestic extremists, domestic terrorists, and in ways that I don't agree with, in ways that I think are actually dangerous. And then the same thing, we're going to show you how the left wing over the last, it's a lot of it has happened since 9/11. Of course, this precedes 9/11. We can go back to the 50s and 60s and see that the new left activists, native activists, red power movement, black power movement, women's movement, the hippies, they were all surveyed by the FBI and others. And we also know that, people on the right have also been surveyed and monitored since the 70s and 80s. It's a common thing. And this is why we need to realize that we're being affected by this. So let's get into the conversation, though, today. Where are we at now? What does this whole conversation regarding domestic terrorism typically revolve around? Around these groups. This is from the Dallas Morning News. Antifa, which of course stands for anti-fascist and tends to be a left-wing ideology and movement. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about Antifa. I've put out videos in the past about the ideology and the history. If you want to find that on the website. It is not a group, as some people like to say. There are a lot of groups. It's more of a decentralized movement and ideology, and some people will take on that name, Dallas Antifa or Anti-Fascists of Ohio or whatever it is, and they're a part of that, decentralized movement. And as so, I don't agree with the labeling Antifa or terrorists, Antifa or violent, even though it's true in some instances, people calling themselves Antifa have been violent and maybe have committed acts of terrorism. But that doesn't mean that every single person who identifies reacts in that way. It's typical, yes. I mean, it seems to become more common. I'm not trying to excuse that. But in the same way, the people on the left try to say Boogaloo Boys, which I know a lot of people who started from this whole Boogaloo thing on, really meme culture feeds into it a lot. But there are also people who are very awake, who have guns and are willing to protect themselves, but they're not plotting, anything to harm any individuals. They're just ready to protect themselves against the communist left or the oppressive left that they perceive, and of course the government. And some people now use the term boogaloo. Others would just say militia, 3%ers, these kinds of things. And those on the left will say those are terrorists. Those are domestic terrorists. We see that a lot as well. So this article kind of outlines those two different groups. And of course, there's a spectrum on there. But my point is that both left and right use it against each other. And maybe in some instances it is true, because there are people who have been self-identified right-wingers, conservatives, who have committed acts of violence. And it is true that there are people on the left who have been anti-fascist and others who have committed acts of violence at protests. And, we can get into the debate around whether or not you think that's a valid strategy in activism generally when you're out there on the streets. I think, look, if you're going to target anybody, if you're going to target buildings, don't target small businesses, don't target people's homes. Go to the Federal Reserve. Yeah, go to the police station and hold the people who are killing people or who are robbing you blind, who are upholding the system, hold them responsible. Go to DC. Don't target innocent people. It's just my 2 cents. But again, this argument, though, it affects groups from both sides. I want to take you guys all the way back to 2009. This 2009, this is the Fox News version of the story. Some will take issue with that, but the facts are the facts. And this is an old picture here. You can see Ron Paul, Cynthia McKinney. I'm not sure who this guy is. And then Ralph Nader. But what we found is that fusion centers, and a lot of you might not even know what a fusion center is. These things came into existence after 9/11. I wrote about this in my recent article for The Last American Vagabond, showing that now they're using contact tracing. They want to start partnering with fusion centers. Fusion centers are these 40-something, I think, maybe more than that, centers established around the country that are essentially kind of a middleman between the federal government and the local police. They gather data and they also share it with local bodies. And so it's supposed to be, fixing the holes that allowed 9/11 to happen, that we just didn't have enough communication. So we need better communication between all these police forces. And what it's doing is it's eroding the line between the local police and the federal government. And it's creating just one massive sort of surveillance grid. And so fusion centers are a part of that. And in 2009, it was revealed that one of the fusion centers, what is known as the Missouri Information Analysis Center, or MIAC, that they put out what has become known as the MIAC report back in February 2009. And they said that they believe that the, quote, modern militia movement could potentially be domestic paramilitary group, domestic violent people. And they labeled people, they labeled wide groups as, let me see, where'd it go? Shit, lost it. The anti-abortion activists, political paraphernalia about third-party candidates, if you supported Ron Paul, if you were against the Federal Reserve, things like that. They said that you could potentially be a domestic terrorist. So this is what the report reads. It says, and this is 2009, due to the current economical and political situation, a lush environment for militia activity has been created. Unemployment rates are high as well as the cost of living expenses. Additionally, President Obama is seen as tight on gun control, and many extremists fear that he will enact firearms confiscations. And MIAC was just one of, again, 58 fusion centers. I'm sure there's more now. This has been a decade ago, that were created by the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. And they're getting millions and hundreds of millions of dollars at the time, probably billions by then, by now. So they go on to describe how people who like third-party candidates like Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, former Georgia Rep Bob Barr, were cited as potential extremists. In addition to anti-abortion activists and conspiracy theorists who believe the U.S., Mexico, and Canada will someday form a North American Union. And it says, quote, militia members most commonly associate with third-party political groups. It's not uncommon for militia members to display constitutional party, campaign for liberty, or libertarian material. And they also say that the "Don't Tread on Me" flag could be a sign of domestic terrorism or domestic extremism, and it just goes on. So again, I mean, this is I know people who are listed in the MIAC report. The group, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is nothing but a propaganda center, if you know anything about them. They, of course, label everybody anti-Semitic, and they call all sorts of just regular activists, radical. This was their Patriot hit list. They did this for the fourth year, and back in that time, that other article is from 2009. In that time, they were putting out this Patriot hit list with lists of people, and a lot of them were friends, including those of you who watch this channel. You know John Bush, the other guy that does the videos here, the other dark-haired 35-year-old man on this channel. He was listed, as well as his former partner, Catherine Bleich, listed as potential domestic terrorists as part of this Patriot hit list. And you can see right here, it basically says patriot groups that generally adhere to variations of a conspiracy theory that suggests the federal government has secret plans to impose martial law in the United States, most likely with the aid of foreign troops, seize all guns held by Americans, toss all those who resist into concentration camps run by FEMA, and ultimately force the country into a kind of socialistic one world government commonly known as the New World Order. I mean, they got it pretty right. So they go on, of course, to say that this is an extreme position. And you can't find the Patriot hit list anymore on their website, but I did find this old blog talking about it. Let me see if I can show it to you guys. Okay, so yeah, here we go. We got a list of people, and some of these people would be Gary Franchi. He's a news broadcaster. Ted Gunderson, of course, you guys know that. Alex Jones, Sheriff Richard Mack. Mostly these are right-wing people. Stuart Rhodes, who's formed the Oath Keepers, but these are not terrorists. These are the people that made it to the Patriot hit list. Glenn Beck, Ron Paul, all those people I mentioned before. Catherine Bleich that I talked about a few moments ago. So yeah, people who are out there spreading, mainly this like libertarian kind of Federal Reserve activists, anarcho-capitalists, voluntarist type people were the ones being labeled. And that was in 2009 under the Obama administration. Now let's move to the left wing. Many of you might not have heard of what's called the Green Scare, which again also happened after 9/11. Hey, coincidentally, right and left being targeted after 9/11 because we know 9/11 was the last major event, much like the COVID-19 operation right now, that allowed governments around the world, mainly the United States, the UK, and Australia, to take more power and to take more liberties from people under the guise of keeping people safe. This is the same shit we're seeing all over again. Okay, so then in the Green Scare is mainly environmental activists. And look, let me be clear that some of these activists are definitely more, these aren't just your hold signs and go walk around peacefully and follow the police line as you parade around the city type of activists. The Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front and other related groups, Earth First and groups of that, they were accused of eco-terrorism because they would do things like burn down laboratories of these pharmaceutical and private companies. Nobody was involved. They didn't kill anybody, but they did commit acts of property damage. And look, personally, I don't think we should place property above life, although I do respect private property rights for the most part. But ELF and ALF, they did different acts like that. They would release animals, they would destroy different things, and they had kind of a period of time where they were very active after 9/11. So they became like the focus of the FBI. And since 2000, it says the U.S. government has prosecuted over 20 cases involving environmentalists, claims that, quote, redefine not only free speech, but also redefine environmentally motivated property destruction, like torching Hummers or tree felling equipment. These arrests, indictments, and trials have been collectively termed the Green Scare by environmentalists. And there's a whole bunch of them. These stories go on. And look, I mean, some of them, maybe some of you would say that they're legitimate in some cases, but if you look into many of these, you don't have, if you can get out of your objective, if you're a right winger and say, well, those are a bunch of left wing extremists, get out of that bubble and just see the cases. And it's just clear examples of the government taking control into their hands and just basically exercising authority that they don't have, and screwing over a lot of people and treating them worse than actual, like, let's say, pedophiles and, traffickers and murderers. That's the crazy thing about this. One group was the Shack 7, the 6 animal rights activists who were found guilty of using their website to incite threats, harassment, vandalism, and attacks against the company Huntington Life Sciences. Originally, 7 individuals were charged, but the case against one of them was dropped. So it says Pamela Ferdin, the current president of Shack USA, told the jury that, quote, for the government to say you can't say this and you can't say this is going down a very scary path of going towards fascism. However, the U.S. attorneys described the convicts as thugs who went far beyond protected speech and lawful protest to engage and incite intimidation, harassment, and violence. So, it's controversial stuff, but this is, again, the left being targeted. And there's an article from The Intercept from back in the day, The Green Scare, how a movement that never killed anyone became the FBI's #1 domestic terrorism threat. And there's that word again, remember? So we're over here talking about the right wingers and the patriots getting labeled domestic extremists, or, they're accused of maybe committing hate crimes for people who are like libertarians and out there spreading the idea that government is violence and that, you should be free and you should question the Federal Reserve and stuff like that. Or that waive the Constitution, or just these silly things. Then you got people on the left who are activists who are committing direct action. They're out there, they're definitely going out there, and some of them are committing acts of destruction to property, trying to stop tests on animals and destruction of the earth and things like that. But they are also being prosecuted with a weight that is not typically seen, because that term domestic terrorist comes into play. And this was very much popularized after the Bush administration. I was in high school during 9/11. I was graduating from high school when the towers fell. And after that, for like a couple of months, they had me, when they were dropping bombs on Saddam Hussein, I was totally bought into the story. I remember watching, just like, wow, watching on TV. They don't put that stuff on TV anymore. Watching on TV, and for a moment, like, yeah, we're getting the bad guys. We're getting the bad guys. Because I bought into it. I voted for John Kerry the one single time I ever voted, because I thought that was going to make a difference. And of course it didn't, and it wouldn't. And then I became a very big anti-war activist. And I remember at the time the Bush administration talking about labeling people domestic terrorists, domestic extremists, and all the stuff was huge after 9/11. Now, because of this situation, the Antifa, the Boogaloo, the right-wingers versus the left-wingers, I see people calling their political enemies domestic terrorists. And my friends, that is feeding into the people at the top of the pyramid the game that they want. Not only do they want us fighting each other, but they want us to normalize the idea that calling somebody a domestic terrorist is a thing you can do, and then that person can be tried as such. Because I'll tell you, if you heard my videos yesterday and you see my recent post, I was talking about how I've been attacked a lot on Facebook and social media for not wearing a mask, and people issuing death threats. I woke up today to death threats again. And some of these people have labeled me and said, like, you're, for not wearing a mask or for not following orders, you're a domestic extremist, you're a domestic terrorist, So that's the way the label can also get thrown around too. When we start normalizing the use of this term, it is going to be used against any of us who don't follow the program, left, right, it doesn't matter. It is not a good thing. Please, the domestic terrorists, if anybody, are the people who are running the government and who have completely taken the United States away from any semblance of constitution or of natural law, of true liberty, and of respecting individual liberty and allowing people to have spontaneous order and to organize their lives as they please, so long as they're not harming other individuals. I mean, that is the true basis of any sort of constitutional freedom and liberty is that concept. And we've gotten so far away from that. So you don't have to be a constitutionalist statist to want to see a world that actually does respect that. In fact, I think that the Constitution itself has flaws and has limits, but it's definitely way better than the crap that we're dealing with today in the United States and other places that have constitutions that are supposed to represent an ideal. I mean, let's be real. Constitutions are just pieces of paper, but they're supposed to represent certain ideals and goals. And we are far away from that. So if you want to have a world that respects that, do not use the term domestic terrorist, domestic extremist to the people that are, there's definitely people acting violent. I'm not saying don't call out violence on the left or the right at all. I'm not saying that. Call that shit out. Make sure we call out the people who are trying to incite violence and feed into the people at the top of the pyramid. What they want is to foment chaos because they know how to create order out of chaos. That's their whole game. So if they can keep us dividing and calling each other, we're the terrorists, they're the terrorists, we forget about the terrorist at the top. And guess what? Domestic terrorism leads to counterterrorism. And counterterrorism is what they've been training for since 9/11. They have been training all around the world using brown people in other countries that most of us don't know where they're at on the map for almost 2 decades now, based on a lie. And much of that activity, that mentality, and that equipment is coming home to the United States and to Australia and to the UK and to much of the European Union in general. It's happening. You know, the militarization that resulted from the lie that was 9/11 and the war on terror has now come home to the United States, and we're seeing it unfold during COVID-19, but it's also unfolding in places like Portland. You don't have to agree with the protesters to see that this is not a good idea to welcome these types of people, whether they're the Department of Defense military soldiers or they're working for the DHS as federal agents. It doesn't matter. They're militarized. They've got weapons. They've got hollow points, and they have been trained how to go into homes, how to rip people out of their houses. They are trained for fighting domestic terrorists. So stop labeling each other domestic terrorists and recognize that the people who are the true terrorists, if we're going to use that word, the people who are truly trying to cause terror and create terror in our lives, are the ones who are involved in governments, the ones who are also working and living in the foundations. I just got this book in the mail. I read it a couple of years ago, and for those of you who saw me speak in 2018 on my Liberate Your Mind tour, I gave a talk called The Pyramid of Power. It was 2 hours long, and it's the basis for my upcoming documentary. And on the chapter about the philanthropic foundations, this book is just a monumental source. It's called Foundations, Their Power and Influence. And it's about the 1952 Congressional Reese Committee, where this attorney was tasked with investigating tax-exempt foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Council on Foreign Relations, and others, and found, as many of us know today, that these foundations form a huge block of power, even though they are not politically elected. So the real terrorists are the people who run these foundations and who pretend to be philanthropists and out here doing good for the people, when really they're using that power and money to gain influence and to run our lives, as well as the puppets in government who continue to enact those orders and who run every 2 to 4 years and wave and smile and act like they're good Christians or good whatever the hell you want to hear. And in behind closed doors, it's all wrestling. They're all friends. They're all connected. You know, the fighting in front of the camera, the arguing about Trump and the media going after, it's all a charade. And it's all designed to divide us so that we start calling each other domestic terrorists and domestic extremists, and we do the work for them. That's the thing, is they're not ready yet, and they might never have to come in with guns into your house if they can get us to turn against each other. If we can get neighbor going at neighbor, ripping at each other's throats for not wearing masks and for not going inside, and you're putting grandma at threat, or we can have just each other labeling each other domestic terrorists, well, that erases. We're starting to psychologically erase the emotion, the care, and the compassion that we should have for every other human being, even when we disagree politically. And if you can erase that compassion and that care and concern for each other, then what you can do is you can create a situation where terrorism against the people becomes normalized and it becomes justified. And you will make excuses about it as long as it's happening to your enemy. Now, whenever it turns around later and it comes back to affect your people, then you're like, hold on, guys, hold on. I think this might not be a big deal. But the other side's ready to turn a deaf ear now because you helped it happen to their people. And you see it becomes a war and a race to the bottom while the people at the top continue to laugh and make money. They're making so much money off of everything going on right now while we're all distracted and fighting. And my fear, the reason I'm choosing to do this video, is that there is so much division right now. This was written about in lockstep. They want to create division. They want to, we know the CIA has gone into South America and in Europe, part of Operation Gladio, but also down in South America. They had the CIA in there funding the different unions and different organizations like that to foment chaos, to create protests, to create racial strife so that they could come in there and take advantage of it and overthrow leaders or just basically put in whatever puppet they want. I believe that's what's going on now, not to try to replace Donald Trump because he's some hero, but dividing the people, creating chaos. And I don't know what their charade is. I can't predict what the future storyline is going to be. It's just a storyline. That's all it really is. It's just for show. It's just to keep you interested. Oh, I'm going to watch the Biden and Trump debate like it means something. Yeah, they just want to keep your eyes glued to their screen for 3 hours instead of looking up real information and thinking about how you can take care of your family. They want you to think about how it's funny Biden said that. It's funny that Trump said that, because the other side are the terrorists, the other side of the extremists. There's no way that we're like them. They're the red and I'm the blue, and I'm the blue and they're the red, and we're the left and they're the right, and we're the right and the left. There's no way any of us can get along, right? There's no way that we could possibly see see something in our brother and sister's eyes that could unite us, that could bring us together. No, there's no way that could happen. Or maybe there is. Maybe there's a way we can get through all this. Maybe there's a way we can find a way to collaborate, to build, to work together, to stop buying into the division, to stop labeling each other domestic terrorists and domestic extremists, and to use those, to reserve those words and that language only for the people up there who would rather you think they don't exist. Because right now, what I know these people would like is if I spend my day and my hours arguing with people on Facebook over masks and arguing over whether or not they understand what these experts say, or if I hear their experts, or, oh, you're making fun of you and scoring the big ego points. That's what they would prefer we do. Instead, we should spend our time creating, building, learning, doing good things with your time, educating yourself, educating your family, getting backup supply of food just in case of any sort of emergency, learning new skills, using freedomcells.org to connect with other people and build a freedom cell in your area so you can break away from the system before it collapses under the weight of all this corruption and of all this insanity that they won't stop beating us down with. Get active, do something. Let's do better than what they have going on here. All right. That's it for the day, guys. Just wanted to leave you guys with some thoughts on that label. And language is magic. Our words are magic. We can decide how we use them and in what way they are applied to each other. We can decide if they're going to create. If you've ever read The Four Agreements, great book, one of my big inspirations, he talks about how the word can be healing and uplifting, or it can be destructive and breaking people down, breaking things down. Your word are magic. It can be used for good magic, or black magic or white magic, right? Are you going to use your words and not only your words, because your thoughts become your words become your actions become your behavior, and your behavior becomes your destiny. So your words are just a piece of the whole puzzle. But if you start with good intention up here, then you use your words to create and to build, and instead of divide and break down, well then, if you follow consistently with that, your actions will also be actions that uplift and that build. So we got to start with the right mindset, use our words, live up to them, actually live in line with them, align our principles, words, and actions. All right, I'm rambling now. Thank you guys for listening. All right, I might be back with a video later on tonight, Freethinker Radio. If not, I appreciate you guys. Please do bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com. People are trying to get me canceled. People are trying to get me deleted. You might not be able to find me on YouTube or Facebook for too much longer, but you can always find me on Float, on Library, on Minds, and at theconsciousresistance.com. Until next time, my friends, remember this. You are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.